Good evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 41st take live from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas. I'm Bear Duplessis, your host as always, and I am so excited to bring to you our first take on this side of 40, the good side of 40 that we are tonight. And it's fantastic to welcome in our very special guest from Developing Palates, the Cigar Surgeon himself, Mr. Jiunn McTavish. John, how you doing tonight?
Bear, I'm good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate being on the show. I'm excited about tonight's show, and I'm excited to be on this side of 40 because I'm on the good side of 40 as well. So, it seems very fitting to me.
And you're definitely on the good side of 40 because you are about to ring in your nuptials, if I understand correctly. You are going to be getting married here.
That is correct. I was doing a little prenuptial, pre-bachelor party, bacheloring it up tonight. We were breaking into some really good old school cigars. We were breaking into some single cask whiskey, and it seemed fitting to have a little bit of whiskey before tonight's show, so we could talk openly and spit some hot fire live on the internet. I find that whiskey and cigars is always a great enabler for fantastic, passionate discussion.
It certainly is, man. And I got to tell you, it's. I'm sorry that I had to pull you away from the party, man. I feel kind of bad about it.
It's all
but
good.
but it's really awesome to have you on, man. You and I got to know each other for first time in person
Yes.
over the weekend and subsequent days of IPCPR this year, and you had. It was really great hanging out with you guys in general at the Cigar Media compound. I learned a lot of different insights into how you view your role within the media and everything, and so I got to know you a lot better. And it was a really insightful trip from that regard, as well as many other regards as well. But then a few days passed by, and Altria puts out their public comments to the ANPRM, and a subsequent op-ed piece or article, rather, not an op-ed, but an article comes out from Cigar Aficionado with a very potent and head-turning headline that Altria is against FDA regulation and doom and gloom, chicken little, the sky is falling, heads are falling, heads are rolling, like just doomsday could, boom, it was all over. Life was
Yeah.
all over. And um, in fantastic fashion, you won't say it, I will, John, but in fantastic fashion, you seemingly come in from fresh legs off of IPCPR with renewed vigor and passion, and in record time, mind you, because this was probably, it felt like an hour, but what conservatively we're talking about, what, 4 or 5 hours after
That's about right. Yeah, sounds
4 or
about right.
5 hours after the article was released, you put out an op-ed piece on Developing Palates, basically, and if I'm using too strong words, John, you can correct me here, but admonishing the journalistic job that was done on this particular piece, simply because a lot of things were taken out of context. The article wasn't necessarily read through completely or represented in its complete fashion, and you had some pretty strong opinions about that. Before we get into what resulted from this first op-ed piece, why don't you tell me a little bit more about it?
Sure, absolutely. And I think admonishing is probably a good way to put it. I think the biggest issue I had with the article was the way that I read it as a consumer. It came across very clearly as a hit piece. And I think hit pieces have their place. I think if you're writing an opinion article, then hit piece is absolutely within the purview of what you do. My biggest issue is that that particular magazine, as it stands right now, whether people like it or not, they're one of the most influential and powerful magazines in our industry. And when you're writing about something that's as important and critical as FDA legislation, I have no issue whatsoever taking any company to task over their support or lack of support or whatever their position might be on FDA regulation of cigars. My biggest issue was the way that they presented the arguments within that article, and really the lack of background. I thought it was a great opportunity. They had a great forum in which they could have educated a lot of consumers who maybe don't even know about cigar regulation, maybe don't even know about the history of cigar regulation. And of course, at the end of the day, really all they did is they referenced one paragraph in a 9-page memo or letter to the ARPM, to the FDA. And to me, that just felt lazy. It felt incomplete. I mean, again, if you want to blast a company because of their stance supporting the FDA, feel free. But if they're writing a 9-page article, I think it probably, in doing due diligence as a journalist, you should really address some of the points in that 8.5 pages. And to me, I'm particularly sensitive to hit pieces and articles that are framed in such a way to make the reader feel a certain thing without really doing the complete recap or a complete analysis of that total article. And to me, again, I just think that that it was just an incomplete job. And so I felt like I had to respond. To be honest, I don't think I was quite expecting the reaction, the passionate conversation that came about of it, and the amount of attention that it necessarily received, both on Facebook and then ultimately really across wider channels as being shared by one of the companies involved. So that was kind of surprising to me.
It really did receive a lot of attention virtually right away, and it was interesting because there was so much, and I think it's because there was so much whirlwind reaction. And to your point about Cigar Aficionado, I think you and I both hold them in a similar regard, and that's a high regard.
Yes.
They've done an amazing job bringing the premium cigar industry into the spotlight in terms of, and something you actually point out, a statistic that you point out, and a statistic that I've used quite often when I've talked about premium cigars. We represent less than 0.5% of the entire tobacco industry.
Yep.
And they've capitalized on it. They've capitalized on it, and they've done an incredible job thus far, representing the industry as I would say, as one of its forefront, if not the forefront publication for cigar news and the cigar lifestyle, etc.
Absolutely.
And so I am totally in agreement with you here, John, for them to go out and now, if this had been any other piece, if this had been about, a cigar release, or if this had been about a company acquiring another cigar company, it's just the context and the subject matter in which it's about that rubbed me the wrong way, in the extreme way that it did.
Yeah.
And I think you and I both had the same reaction to it. I reshared the article, and I hadn't read it yet. I saw it, and I reshared it without kind of any commentary on it initially. And I kind of realized that I was doing a disservice because I wasn't really necessarily posting an opinion on it, because I thought, well, this is no different, but this is their comment today, etc. We'll get to their comments back in 2014 here in a minute. But to me, it just seemed, I felt like I did a service on it. So I jumped back on social media, and I'm seeing what's going on with it. And then I see your article later in the day, your op-ed piece, and holy hand grenades, man. Jesus, man, you really stepped into the shit, didn't you?
Somebody needed to jump on that hand grenade. I mean, obviously a virtual hand grenade. And I was fully prepared to jump on it. And I was fully prepared for some rancorous responses. I wasn't expecting, because I love developing palates, but we're not Cigar Aficionado, so I wasn't frankly expecting widespread coverage, or as it were, widespread attention of that particular article. And I don't even know really how it started to spread on Facebook, but within really the matter of, I would say, a short number of hours, I was being tagged across multiple channels, I think 15 or 16 different cigar groups. And there was some very, shall we say, passionate and engaged conversations going on. And it happened at a very rapid pace.
I mean, it really did. It really seemed to I mean, viral, is a word that gets
Mm.
thrown around entirely way too often, and I even apologize to everyone listening and watching right now for using that word because it's just overused. It just frankly is. Um, but there was that kind of infectious passion that was kind of drawn up in the wake of the initial article and then your subsequent op-ed piece. And you and I were talking a little bit before the show, and I said that it was fitting that you or a member of the Developing Palates team were to do this piece. And the reason I said that was because, um, you know, in the world of cigar media, in the world of cigar ratings, um, nobody has a more controversial rating system. At least not yet.
At
There's
least not yet.
probably there's probably a couple that are on the verge or flirting with it, but at least most controversial rating system that exists in cigar media today. And I've always talked about, when people find out that I'm somewhat associated with you guys, through our mutual relationship with Coop, people always ask me like, "Hey, so Aaron gave my cigar a 5.7. Is that good? Or like, I don't even understand the rating system. What's this about? Like, I don't get it." And 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 I don't even try to answer them in the context of what you guys want the rating system to be. I simply say this is exactly why they created this rating system, because this conversation that you and I are having right now about it.
Yeah.
And I said it drums up conversation, it drums up controversy. People are chatting about it regardless if they understand it or not, and it's absolutely fantastic because it creates discussion. So
Yeah.
Just to take a little leeway from the chaos that ensued from your subsequent article, regarding my comments and my appreciation for what you all do, and stating that it was fitting that one of you all did it. I mean, what do you think about other cigar media, or just your piece in general, on how your response and other responses took place?
So I think there was kind of two camps. That is, I think there was a lot of really good back and forth, engaged conversation, both on people's sort of private pages and then maybe in a more public way. And I think there was some great conversation that came about that. I think one of the people who talked about was Jeff Borshowitz. Jeff is, for those who I can't imagine anyone wouldn't be aware, Jeff is owner of some of the most successful cigar shops, Corona Cigar Company.
They've been living under rocks.
Living under rocks. And Jeff, obviously not being content enough to have a very successful chain of cigar stores, decided to take the crazy route and start up growing tobacco in Florida, which hadn't been done, I think, in like 90 years, and has made a great success of that. Wonderful individual. And Jeff was one of the people that was sort of engaging in a what I would call a higher level conversation. And it was nice to see that sort of discussion taking place where people were sort of discussing the merits or, not merits of what it meant to support the FDA legislation or what that legislation ultimately meant for the industry. And I think regardless of sort of what side of that sort of you land on, or where you sort of landed in response to either the original, op-ed or our response to that op-ed, I think the conversation that came out of that was good, because I think there's a significant number of consumers, cigar brands, manufacturers that are not necessarily engaged in that discussion. And I think, at the end of the day, if somebody needs to come along and kick a hornet's nest and sort of get people riled up and start talking about this stuff, really, we should have been doing this 2 years ago. We should have been doing this 4 years ago. But I'm glad to see that conversation happening, because I think people need to be, people on a daily basis need to be at that level of passion. They need to be that engaged and upset and sort of passionate, because, we're really on the verge. Arguably, we're already there where daily we're seeing cigar rights across America eroding, and across Canada a long time ago eroding constantly. All you need to do is look at popular cigar media sites and see how many anti-smoking bills are being passed statewide or municipality-wide on a daily basis. And we're well past the part of marching in the street. We're well past the part of yelling online. I mean, like as a Canadian, and I think that's sort of where my viewpoint is like, look, we're already at the end of that. We've already seen what happens at the end of that tunnel when all these legislation comes through unopposed, and it's only getting worse for us because we're about to potentially be hit by plain packaging, which could absolutely decimate the cigar industry, what's left of the cigar industry in Canada. So we come from a place of experience. And, you know, I say, look, everyone should be upset. Everyone should be walking around on a daily basis, fired up and engaged and angry and loud about all the negative things that are coming down in the industry. Because to be frank, I think part of what is in the cigar culture is this sort of mentality of smoking cigars and being relaxed and being easygoing and not being those people. And I think that's hurt us in the long run is that, you know, unfortunately we're late to the party on this stuff. That we, you know, we should have been this way 5, 6 years ago. People should have been marching in the street 5 or 6 years ago, and now we're playing a lot of catch up.
It really is quite sad, and it's still quite sad. And Coop and I have talked about this a number of times, both on and off the air, that the amount of ignorance that exists in the cigar smoking world. Now, the guys online shouting with the top of their lungs, you know, with their typewriter and everything, or their computer keyboard, because no one has a typewriter anymore. What the hell am I saying? But those people are not who I'm talking about. It's the people that I'm in the retail sector. You're in the retail sector, John. There's people that come into our shops and don't know, frankly, how, you know, what's going on, especially in the United States. They don't know what the FDA regulations are saying. They don't know what's going on. People are still asking us if they can get Cubans. You know, I mean, there's just so much rampant ignorance, and it's our job as members of the industry, whether it be in our parts as the media or in our part as retailers, to educate people. And to that point, let's talk about Jeff Borshwitz for a second, because he has such a unique perspective. Absolutely. In general, because like you said, he, you know, building one of the most successful retail sectors in this industry wasn't good enough for him.
Yeah,
so
he wasn't satisfied with that success.
Yeah. So he just decided to go ahead and start growing tobacco in a place that, you know, hadn't seen it in almost a century, and do it successfully. Very successfully. Yeah. I mean, one of the most highly popular, highly polarizing cigars that have come out onto the market in the last decade. Easy. Yeah. And an incredibly passionate individual. And you and I were talking about him both off the air, John. And what I was saying about Jeff was that I really, really admired him, because while I disagreed with I disagreed with a portion of his position. He was so adamant and so engaged and so irate kind of leaves it to be the fact that he's irrational. He's not being irrational, but he was so irate about the subject matter at hand. He called out Michael Herklotz of Nat Sherman online, but he didn't at the same time. He very adamantly and angrily opposed his position and basically said everything that he was saying was untrue. And he knew what Altria was all about, and Altria couldn't put out whatever position they wanted in any kind of statement. He was gonna disagree with it. Essentially, you know, I'm mixing words here a little bit, but he was just opposed to it. But at the end of the day, it was done in such a respectful manner, and that's where I already had a lot of admiration for Jeff and Michael both, and they went up that day for me, for both of them, because I was like, man, this is the type of debate that we need to have in this country, for one, and two, in this industry more often than not. Because what was ensuing off of your initial piece, John, and that what got me riled up wasn't the fact that people were disagreeing with you, and it wasn't the fact that people were generally disagreeing with me, because I basically agreed with your position for the most part. It was the fact that there was just personal attacks coming out left and right, saying like, what the hell does this guy know? He's a Canadian. He should have his Cigar Media credentials revoked, was one line, and other stuff. I mean, it just blatant overreaction to what was accurately defined as an op-ed piece that you wrote. And honestly, it wasn't even I mean, if we break it down, John, and no offense to you and your brilliant writing, but if we break it down, it's not like you were, pulling out rabbits out of a hat here. You weren't going off completely into left field, if I could throw another metaphor at it. I mean, you were simply, you were simply stating some some concise, verifiable facts about the piece and about the history of Altria when it comes to FDA regulation.
Yeah.
And so the personal attacks is what got me riled up. I mean, I'll go ahead and ask you, how did you feel about it? How did you feel when people started calling you out personally?
The funny thing about, of course, being a Canadian, we always laugh because everyone says, Canadians are very easygoing, and I think that's probably a good generalization about Canadian culture. That is true, but I think there's sort of two parts to that. One is everyone assumes Canadians are suckers and they can be pushovers, which is not true. And the second part of that is that that we're maybe easily riled, and that is also not true. I mean, I already had you kind of grow up in Canada with a bit of a thick skin. You kind of have to have a thick skin if you're growing out in Western Canada in the cold weather in the winters. You kind of arbitrarily get a thick skin from the weather, but you also get a thick skin just from culture. I mean,
Thanks for not bringing up the Bears, by the way, John.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
No problem. You get that culture from people just sort of busting on each other, and I think it's a character building thing. You just learn to not become a reactionary person. So certainly, being in the cigar media as long as I have, more than 7 years now, I've certainly, and I don't know if you've been on the receiving call, but I've been on the receiving end of many.
I probably will be after tonight, but just
on the receiving end of some upset manufacturers responding to the reviews of cigars or articles. And I expect that because they're very passionate people that care a lot about the product they produce. They're passionate individuals. It's an industry full of passionate people. And so, and I expect that. And I know that they're coming from a place of that sort of, that creativity, and they don't mean it in a personal way, so I don't take it in a personal way. So when I saw some of the stuff devolving into personal attacks, to be honest, it kind of it was just water off a duck's back, as it were, because I just I don't think you can let that stuff get to you personally and still be in the cigar industry. And I just want to give some props to Charlie at Half Wheel, who made the mistake of going on vacation.
God darn him!
I mean, he was kicking himself when he turned his phone on and saw what was going on, and he's like, "Look, I was just trying to take a couple days off from working, and this is what happens." And he did a great follow-up article in response, and certainly provided a lot more background and detail to the whole piece. But my comment on that would be, that is the kind of thing that I would expect out of an institution, a cigar media company like Cigar Aficionado. That's what I was wanting them to do. Even if they had come out and, again, led with the same headline and led with the same hit piece to say, we're against Altria, we believe that what they're doing is wrong. What they were missing was the other 4 pages, which was analyzing the complete statement and in, providing more information about what was going on with the fight against the FDA and cigar regulation in general. And you didn't get any of that out of that article. It was like 3 paragraphs, and it was all an opinion piece. So
it was all an opinion piece being masked as a news article, which is what I had a problem with.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
That was really what set me off in the first place.
Right? Yeah, I was gonna say you called it before the show. You called it what did you call it? There was a term you used.
I think I called it a hit piece.
A hit piece. Oh, you mentioned that. Okay, so
yeah,
and my biggest problem with it too. Again, it was an op-ed that was masked as a news article. Was that it was basically it was actually the definition of what's a problem with journalism and what's a problem with our society today. It was a headline.
Clickbait articles.
Exactly. It was just all headline, and there was so much more to Altria's comments. There was so much more that could have been done with that piece, and it was just really surprising, given the excellence at which Cigar Aficionado has represented this industry for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
And like I said, if it had been about anything else, any other piece, any other subject in the industry, you and I wouldn't be talking about it, for one, and two, I mean, it might have darkened the subject matter of some corner in some cigar shop in this country. But if it had been about any other subject matter, it would have been blown off. But because of what it's about, it got a higher level of attention, and negative attention, and that was my ultimate problem with it. And so, which leads me into my second thing. So you followed this up a few days later with another piece, and John, before the show, I told you I actually just read it just this week. I didn't see it at the time when it came out, and I told you a little bit before the show. Disappointed is a rather strong word, but I felt like it was unnecessary, and I don't think you were apologetic in it, although some people may have thought that. Clarification is always a good thing. I'm always a big fan of clarification. I wish that some people would do it more often, honestly. But why did you feel it was necessary? And tell us a little bit about the substance of that second piece that you wrote just a few days later.
Sure, absolutely. So I think the biggest issue for me was that when you're writing an article, first of all, in general, and like I always look to William Cooper. I mean, Coop is an encyclopedia of cigar knowledge. And when Coop writes an article, I mean,
he's an encyclopedia about a lot of things.
He's an encyclopedia about a lot of things. But when you read an article from Coop, you're reading a lot of background, a lot of factual, detailed information that goes into an article. You're not just reading about a cigar. You're not just reading about a brand. You're reading about the history of the brand. You're reading about what happened last month, and you're getting a lot of that background detail. And I didn't feel that I, first of all, had enough time to sort of properly prepare for, and again, I'll refer to Charlie at Half Wheel, who did a fantastic job at providing a lot of the 40-year background history of Altria and previous fights with the tobacco legislation in the United States. And quite frankly, I didn't have enough time to prepare a detailed analysis of some of those components that I would have rather done. And the second piece of that is, some of the language and some of the way in which some of my arguments were framed weren't quite the language that I would have preferred, which isn't to say that I was trying to dial my argument back in any way. It's just that, upon reflection, looking over some of the ways that I tried to connect different ideas together, the way in which I did that was rushed. And I am apologetic in the sense that I would have rather done a better job of that. I'm not apologetic in the sense that what I said was true and what I said is what I feel. And I kind of felt like I backed that up in the follow-up article to say, look, I'm just clarifying, we at Developing Palates and my personal opinion is we do not support FDA legislation of cigars. We don't believe that the FDA should legislate cigars. Do I personally believe that FDA legislation is inevitable? Well, it's already in place. So that's a moot argument. Really what we're arguing for is for those for premium cigars to be exempted. So
Correct.
We're not, and I think that was I think that's something that keeps getting tossed back and forth online. It's like, look, we already live in a legislated world. That is a fact. You can put your head in the sand and pretend that doesn't exist, but it's a fact. So really at this stage, we're arguing for those cigars to be exempted or for some of the legislative piece to be overturned. It's a reality of the market that we're in. So really, I just wanted to, more carefully choose some of the language that I was using to connecting Altria's position on tobacco and their support of FDA legislation and my take on that. And the other piece I'd say on that is that I wasn't really approaching it as trying to apologize or explain or defend Altria's support of that. I think if you look at it from a pragmatic point of view, if you look at it from a detached perspective, which is tough because we're a passionate industry, and say, look, if you're running a $1 billion cigar industry or a $1 billion cigar company, and you've got two options. One, you can fight against legislation that you've historically lost against the federal government, which puts you on the defensive, that puts you in sort of a place where you're sort of out of the inner ring fighting against that legislation, or you can go along with it because, again, it's already in place, and you can try and maneuver and change that legislation from within to me, that's a no-brainer. Like strategically, that makes far more sense to me. But again, I don't think a lot of people necessarily look at that because they're sort of caught up in that that passion of the industry to say, well, I would never go along with that. Okay, that that's fine. That's perfectly an acceptable position to have. But I'm saying if you're a CEO of a billion-dollar company, you're probably going to be more of a pragmatist and approach it from the second stance rather than the first stance. And again, I didn't want to get hung up on that sort of FDA piece because I felt it had been hashed back and forth. What I really wanted to go on was, look, there's 8.5 pages of really solid arguments supporting cigar industry, and I really want those sentiments and a lot of those pieces, which I thought were really clearly defined. Especially, they did a really great job of, I think it was 11 points or 13 points of defining what a premium cigar was, a premium handmade cigar was, in a way that protects all boutique cigar manufacturers, that protects the handmade cigar industry as a whole, and does a really great job of closing any loopholes of machine-made or really the attempt to take non-premium handmade cigars and sort of put them in this premium handmade cigar category. And to me, I thought that was something that people should have looked at and said, yes, this is a great argument. Let's, at the very least, even if we oppose all of what they stand for, let's pull that argument out and say, this is a great argument. This is a great piece. Everyone should be looking at this, and we should be echoing this argument across the industry and repeating it.
The 2 points that I really want to finalize and get to, and then we'll actually move off of this subject because I did want to at least have a little bit of fun tonight. Actually, we've been having fun the whole night. What the hell am I saying?
Absolutely.
The 2 points, and I want to make this absolutely clear because I think you made it clear in your clarifying point too. Yeah. And I don't feel like I need to clarify this because if anyone's listened to me on Cigar Coop Primetime Special Edition or on this show, knows that I am vehemently and passionately and have been fighting for the exemption of premium cigars, and the idea of the FDA regulation still angers me to the core of everything that I am, and everything that I love about this industry. So if there's any confusion whatsoever about my, I guess, non-resonant reaction to Altria's comments, let that be absolutely clear. And John, I'm going to speak for you. I think you're in the same camp as that. You're opposed to FDA regulation, but as you clearly stated, they exist, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. But it's the reality in which we live in. And I'll quote CRA director, executive director Glenn Loop on this. We live in a political reality. It is the political reality in which we live in, and we have to operate within the confines of the reality in which we exist. The idea of a world of no FDA regulation does not exist for us. It is no longer a reality. It is no longer a possibility necessarily. It is something we can certainly fight for, dream of, and do everything we can to make the premium cigar industry continue in a successful course. And that's what we're doing, hopefully, every day that we're working inside this industry. But I absolutely want to make that clear that is something that I am vehemently opposed to. That being said, concerning Altria's comments, the reason I was so lackadaisical at first, and I said it earlier, was the fact that their stance really hasn't changed since 2014. Their wording on the subject matter really hasn't changed. And so the fact that exists, that was 4 years ago, John. 4 years ago is ancient history, man.
Yeah, if anything, I would say that their the position in which they took in the follow-up article was considerably more supportive of the boutique handmade cigar industry than the original comments back in 2014. I think, again, I don't expect people who are opposed to the entire comment, 9-page comment that they made, to embrace that in any way. But I look at that as an encouraging thing to say, look, this is a company that didn't really have a lot a lot to say in support of the handmade premium cigar industry when their original comments came in 2014, and I think the revised comments that they've just submitted, again, I think the 8.5 pages kind of speak for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what didn't exist in 2014 was the fact that they did not have a controlling and ownership interest in Nat Sherman.
Yes, I think that was a huge part. Absolutely.
That's the biggest difference. And in the wake of the part we were talking a little bit about the personal attacks on you and everything, the one thing that was absolutely ludicrous to me was the reaction that towards Nat Sherman. You and I have both heard of instances in which reps and Michael Herklotz was getting called out online, and reps in general were getting attacked, saying, I'm never going to, personal attacks of their character. And how could they work for such a company? And they were never going to, everything from we're never going to carry a Nat Sherman product ever again to, just an overreaction of a state. Overreaction is not necessarily the case. I get the passion, and that's great, and I applaud it. But at the same time, these are men just like you or I, John, and they're trying to put food on their table, trying to pay their bills, take care of their families, the same way they were the day before the comments came out.
Yep.
And to personally attack them, it just doesn't sit well with me personally.
Yeah, and I want to say, because I have a lot of respect for director Glenn Loop and the work he's done. And I think he said this in the past, and I will certainly echo the statement that I think a lot of people have, in response to legislative efforts and efforts by the CRA to get people to be motivated, to be mobilized in responding to a lot of the legislation that's come out. And I think there's been a lot of, look, I already signed a thing last week. I've already signed 5 of them. And I think Director Glenn Loop has said this in the past, and again, I want to echo it, is that if you don't understand that the anti-tobacco lobby groups will not be satisfied until cigar products are completely banned from the United States.
Eradicated. Not banned, just do not exist.
That is, and I can tell you again, as a Canadian, we have absolutely seen that pathway occur, and it is currently occurring in Canada. And that is 100% the reality of the United States, that is the pathway of lobby groups to eradicate cigars from the United States. And if you think for 1 second that is not their goal, you need to go back and listen to statements that he's made and read articles that he's written, because I can 100% guarantee you that is their goal. And they're not going to do it overnight. They're going to win it by a battle of a million inches, and that's why they do need to be opposed, and legislative efforts against cigars do need to be opposed at every single turn.
Absolutely. If we continue to let them win every single battle, they're ultimately going to win the war. And one of the things that I absolutely love about this history, about this company, is its history. The families that exist within it, their stories, all that's going to disappear.
Yep.
And you're certainly not being over dramatic, and I'm not being over dramatic about that statement. Let's take Stephen Bailey's family, Cornelius and Anthony. His family has been growing tobacco in the state of Virginia since the Civil War, or the Civil War era, rather, and has a rich family history rooted in that community, rooted in that state. And he has done tremendous things for the tobacco industry and now in the premium cigar industry. If the anti-tobacco lobby gets its way, they will be basically saying that a man of his stature and the accomplishments in which his family have done over the past century and a half does not matter.
Yep.
And not only is that tragic, that's absolutely insulting. And if that doesn't, anyone who's kind of like wish-washy or on the fence about tobacco or about, tobacco use or cigar smoking in general happens to be watching this show, let me just tell you that if that doesn't tweak a nerve with you, then you have no soul. Because it should. saying that a person's lifelong work, their father's lifelong work, their grandfather's lifelong work, and their great grandfather's lifelong work doesn't matter and has no bearing, then you absolutely have no soul.
And we haven't even touched upon the massive economic and social impact that would have to companies like Nicaragua, Mexico, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, if
this is an international issue.
It is a
Absolutely.
massive international issue. Yeah, you're absolutely looking at destabilizing. You think about cities like Esteli, you think about Santiago and the Dominican Republic. I mean, you're talking about tens upon tens of thousands of dollars or people out of work, and the impact to those cities, those states, those countries would be measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars, to say nothing of the human rights impact to these people's state of life, their ability to actually bring food and put food on the table. I think I just think that frankly, a lot of the people that have been pushing for the anti-tobacco legislation from a government perspective, they aren't looking at the big picture by any stretch of the imagination. They don't see the big picture of not only what is it going to do to small business owners, manufacturers within the United States, like you said, the history of tobacco growing and tobacco families in the United States, but also the international impact couldn't even possibly be measured. It's so massive.
It absolutely is. I mean, and you know what the thing about it is, John, we haven't even scratched the surface on the impact.
No.
In the last few minutes of discussion and the areas, and we haven't even scratched the surface of the damage that it could do to economies, to families, to people, to entire industries. And we're not just talking about tobacco industries either. So we're gonna need a lot longer of a show to discuss.
So I would say at the end of the day, before posting a hostile comment on Facebook against Michael Herklotz or any member of Nat Sherman or myself, make sure you're a member of the CRA first, because it makes you an enormous hypocrite to not be a member of the CRA and then come out and personally attack any member of Cigar Media or any member of a cigar manufacturer out there without being a CRA member. So that to me, that's step one.
And what I will finalize with that very reasonable request there, John, is the fact that if you do have the passion that you have with your words, although in our opinions, our collective opinions here today, that may be misguided in the personal attacks, that you take that energy and take that fight and take that grit and take it to your representatives.
Absolutely.
And take it to the CRA so that they can fight for you, and take it to the government. That's the real problem. Because honestly,
and call your local representative.
Absolutely. Because honestly, picking a fight with John McTavish isn't going to do any good.
No good at all.
So
I don't make the laws, brother.
So I think we did
we put a pin in that?
beat the dead horse a little bit. So. We didn't, and we didn't really apologize once, much to Aaron's chagrin. I'm sure he's watching right now and wondering, how many times he was probably counting. He was probably taking prop bets on how many times, we were going to say sorry to somebody, at some point. So
yeah, I said the original title I wanted for our FDA follow-up, my post-op article follow-up was "Sorry, We're Not Sorry." But it didn't really ring with the, we didn't really want to go for a clickbait article, so we
exactly, yeah. Then you would have been perpetuating the problem, John. Exactly. Good call. Exactly. Well done, sir. Well done. Well done. So to kind of wrap this up, I wanted to have a little fun. Your story within the industry is really fantastic, John. You've been smoking cigars and working in the industry for over 11 years now. You've had your own personal blog. You worked with another great media outlet, Cigar Federation, in past before you moved over to Developing Palates, and now you're with Developing Palates. Tell us just in just a few words a little bit about that journey. But the final question I wanted to ask after you're done with your little mini bio here, for those of you who don't know your credentials, they are readily available. But I would like to know, what's the dream? Where does it all end for the Cigar Surgeon? Where do you see yourself in the next 11 years?
My quick bio is that before making the insane choice to actually work in the industry, I have people question my sanity all the time. They're like, why, knowing what you know about the industry, why would you go work in the industry? And I say, well, I could ask you the same thing because you work in the industry too. But yeah, I started Cigar Blog, I think back in 2012. It all kind of blends together now. And really, through the journey of that blog, I wanted to write about cigars and I wanted to write about the industry. I didn't want to spend all my time maintaining a website. And I think a lot of people who are in the industry know that effort very well. It's a lot of thankless work. So what happened was Logan Lawler, who was the owner of Cigar Federation at the time, near the end of my tenure of sort of managing the site, and I was about to actually throw in the towel because the person I had working doing the website management for me unfortunately had to leave. And so I had an opportunity to join Cigar Federation, which was great because I really enjoyed my time there. I really enjoyed the people there. I mean, great people who are now in the industry. Rob Rasmussen, who's now with Mombacho Cigars. So I made some really good friends. And then obviously later, Trip came on board with Cigar Federation. Dennis, Jared was always there. Matt was always there. So it was a fun journey. And then, I think along with our own careers, there comes a point where you sort of decide you need to make a transition. And last year, sort of the end of last year, I decided, I kind of need to hand the baton, as it were, over to Trip and sort of let Trip build that community and shape that the way he wanted, and had an opportunity to join the guys at Developing Palates, as Aaron would call it. Beating that bush for a year to try to get me to join the guys at Developing Palates. And it's a really good fit. I mean, obviously we all kind of got to experience that culture firsthand at the Media House in Las Vegas, which I think was a fun experiment, which ultimately was a lot of fun. Fortunately, we didn't drown any members of the Cigar Media, so that was very positive for me on a personal level. Important safety note: if you can't swim, very important to notify other members of the household that you can't swim before jumping into a 8-foot deep pool. Just
Just a good call. Yeah.
important safety note.
Or falling asleep on a float,
Or falling asleep on a float. That's correct.
with a lit cigar in your mouth.
Yeah.
You might need to notify some people.
That's right. So really about 3.5 years ago, sort of along this journey, I was working in the oil and gas industry, one of many industries that I've been in my life, as a guy who's much older than I look. And unfortunately, I got laid off in the oil and gas industry and had an opportunity to join the retail industry with someone who I'd known for many, many years. So, that's kind of the journey I've been on in Canada, is in cigar retail. And the company I'm with, we're up to 19 cigar stores now, presumably opening 20 at some point in the near future. And if you and this is not really a succinct answer, but where do I want to go ultimately? I think I kind of saw myself moving into the greater cigar industry in the United States, although I don't know how realistic that journey is. I think I've been very happy with the pathway and sort of where the journey within Cigar Media and retail has taken me thus far. And I think I'm just kind of happy to continue going where that's going, and hopefully it'll kind of lead me towards that ultimate goal of sort of directly working in a greater capacity within the U.S. cigar industry.
That's fantastic, man. You really have done an incredible job along the way, and you are doing such a great job with Developing Palates. And
Thanks,
really want to applaud the work that all of you guys do for Developing Palates, and the guys at Cigar Federation as well. They're
great guys.
Fantastic group of gentlemen that I had the privilege of meeting and working with. And to give a little bit of a shout out to the work that you do in the retail sector in Canada. I got to be honest, John, and I was ignorant in this misconception that I was like, John, I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know you were Canadian, but until we actually met in person, which
then I started to know, like, hey, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah. Kind of tipped you off a little bit. So, but I was just very impressed with how in depth your knowledge was of the non-Cuban industry, and my assumption was that anyone outside of the United States, for the most part, their knowledge of the cigar industry would probably, as far as an authority, probably lies somewhere in the Cuban sector. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh well, maybe John's an outlier, and Then I met your colleague who runs another one of these stops and shops in the group that you're in. Your boy AK Patel, you
Mm-hmm.
brought over to the Cigar Media Pound. What an impressive gentleman he
Oh
was.
yeah.
And same thing. His understanding and knowledge uh, of the market outside of Cuba was just fantastic. I
He's
really enjoyed the conversation I had with him.
he I would call his appetite for cigar knowledge and cigar learning to be voracious. It's incredible to see the guy come into the industry, come into our industry, and every day he's looking to expand and sort of evolve his knowledge really so that he can share that with his customers. And I think he grasped right away the culture of sort of the cigar industry, which is, he's not just doing it to be a successful business owner. He's a very successful business owner, but he's also looking to sort of bring the cigar community in his city and his greater area
Hmm.
together. And the more people he can bring in the fold, and the more people he can educate, and the more that he can share with those people, that's sort of where he derives his satisfaction. And I mean, we hear it a lot. The very first thing that people say to us when they hear that we're from Canada and the retail, and they say, "Oh, okay, you sell a lot of Cuban cigars." It's like, well, yeah, we definitely sell Cuban cigars, but I mean, the truth of the matter is that the Canadian palate, especially, I think we've seen a dramatic shift in both the sort of type of product that Canadian smokers are going for, and their interest in non-Cuban products, to the point where, if you look at our average humidor here, I would say at least 65% of the products that are in our humidor are non-Cuban, and the products that people are coming in asking for are non-Cuban products. I think the only difference is that, and I was at an event on Thursday, and I would say, well, as an example, so it was a Drew Estate event, and it was a really great event. And so, the average guy there was lighting up 2 or 3 Drew Estate cigars, and then they were lighting up a Cuban. And then they went back to Drew Estate cigars. And that was just sort of that to me is like a typical night of having a HERF or having a cigar event. Is like, yeah, a guy might light up a Cuban cigar to start the night, or he might light up a Cuban cigar halfway through the night. But the other 3 or 4 cigars that he smoked that night are all non-Cuban products from a variety of different manufacturers. So, um,
That's
you know,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's awesome. It's
it's
kind of
awesome
it's
to
kind of
know.
yeah,
And it was what I really liked about AK's approach. Like AK came to the Cigar Media compound, and he didn't come to hang out. And he came to hang out and have a good time like everybody did. But he was right in the thick of it. We had the great privilege of picking the brains of some great people of this industry. Steve Saka, Hector
yeah,
Alfonso, Riste
yeah.
from SK came by as well. And we were sitting there chumming it up with them, but we were also picking the brains of geniuses.
Oh
It was
yeah.
kind of it was really a fantastic opportunity. Man, he was right in the middle of it.
Yeah, he's
You
he's
know,
just he's a tobacco sponge. He's just every amount of knowledge or information that they can give him. I mean, you could just see him storing that away in his brain and sort of processing that. Absolutely.
if we could just multiply him, that'd be fantastic. Bring, and import some of that sponge-like
No,
quality into
no,
this
he's
country.
ours. You can't have him. He's ours. You can't have him. There's no amount of money.
Awesome, man. Well,
Yeah.
John, really appreciate you coming on board for our 41st take. It was an
Thank you,
absolutely
brother.
fantastic pleasure. Congratulations on the upcoming nuptials.
Thank you,
Uh,
sir.
um, Marriage is by far the greatest thing I've ever done. And then the second greatest thing I ever did was have a child with my beautiful wife. So, good luck,
Thank you, sir.
congratulations,
Thank
and
you.
hope it's everything that you possibly wanted to. Little piece of marriage advice on your wedding day: if you can, after you've said your vows and everything like that, take a moment, turn around, and see who's there. Take a little snapshot, a little memory shot of everybody that's sitting there in the pews if it's a church, or in the crowd if it's another venue, and try to commit that little photo to memory, man, because the pastor who married my wife and I had us do that, and that is an image, man. I remember almost every face, generally speaking, where they were, and that was a really nice moment. So if I could
Nice.
pass a little unsolicited advice to you on your wedding day, do that, man. It'll be awesome for you.
Thanks for
So
that. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me on the show, Bear. you know, it was a great, like I said, it was really great having the opportunity to spend some one-on-one time in Vegas in the media house, and hopefully have
Indeed.
the opportunity to spend some more time with you before next year, where we have the media house 2.0 Redux.
Sounds great.
All
Sounds
right,
great. I'm looking forward to seeing you again too, John. Again,
awesome.
thank you so much for everyone who tuned in and got to watch our 41st take. I really appreciate all your likes, shares, and comments as always. For everyone here at ELOSOFUMAR Takes, we are live, of course, as always, from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas. For John McTavish, the cigar surgeon of Developing Palates. Check out developingpalates.com for all the awesome work that they do, cigars, beer, even some coffee editorials too, if you didn't know that. And of course, amazing op-ed pieces like the one that we just discussed and beat the dead horse with tonight. We really appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, I'm Barry Duplessis as always. This is ELOSOFUMAR Takes. This was our 41st take for John McTavish. I'm Barry Duplessis. We'll see you next time.